People, got my can't go. Ding and ding and ding. Welcome to Garvey's Ghost TV, December 29th. We are having the great rollback, reset, CDC and people just rolling and changing up their stuff. So we're going to go over that. A discussion, excuse me, about liberals, someone says they need to do next year. I'm going to comment on that. And then one of the laws that they have out in New York, that they were looking to enact, and that we actually have in New Jersey. So some people think what happened in, think that what they see in New York is new, and it's not. So we'll go over that too. So let's get over there. I'm trying not to make this an hour and a half. All right, so first up, get this PDF down, get back to Chrome. Let's look at these health experts. These health experts said, oh, it's reloaded. So, health experts, surge in COVID-19 cases should no longer be a prime metric of the pandemic. That is, what's this? Oh, we got ads. Always ads, right? Now, some of us said this a while back. We said, hey, you're going to have cases, and there's nothing you can do about it. So what you really should think about is who's getting really sick and who's going to the hospital. Because if you're not sick and going to the hospital, then, it shouldn't matter if you have a case. Well, we were said to be giving medical misinformation and not taking this seriously. But here they are, a year and a half later, saying the same things that we said last year. So let's look at this. All right. For 2 years, infections have always preceded hospitalizations, which preceded deaths. So you could look at infections and know what was coming. Now, that's generally true. Okay? Generally, cases will come first, and about 2 weeks later, you'll see the spikes in deaths. And what we see now is cases go up, but the deaths are small. So that's what we expect. So we're not surprised by any of that. So let's go back here. But what's important, right, is that they're recognizing what we said. That infections, deaths, hospitalizations should be looked at separately, and you shouldn't panic if there is a rise in cases. So we were right last year. Right? Here goes CDC's Rochelle Walensky. She admits COVID-19 PCR tests have a major flaw. Conservatives demand answers. Why do only conservatives demand answers. I would think any thinking person whose lives have been negatively impacted by this would have questions. Got questions. Notice how I drank and talked at the same time. I love how this software goes. Anyway, here she goes. That PCR tests can show positive cases for as long as 3 months. Now, when we said this last year, we knew that you would have viral particles, dead virus. Viruses are not alive, but that's another story. We knew that this would happen, and that if you got this test, especially after you had COVID, you could test positive for 3 months, maybe longer. And the hospitals that do testing, because I've done a lot of testing, they told you if you had COVID not to test for 3 months because they knew it could come back. Now it's December 2021. And Walensky, who runs the CDC, is admitting this thing that we knew. Now, the other thing was that changed how, let's see, well, here we go. Oh, no, here. The updated CDC guidelines don't require testing at the end of isolations because PCR tests can stay positive up to 12 weeks. So we have people in isolation for a very long time who are relying on PCR. The rapid antigen tests may be less sensitive when it comes to Omicron variant. We do know that the most sensitive test you can do is a PCR. So if you have symptoms and a negative antigen test, we do ask that you go and get a PCR test to make sure those symptoms aren't contributable to COVID. So we just basically had them just change the whole policy after messing with everybody for coming up on 2 years. 2 years. 2 years. I don't get it. What's the next one? So here's Fauci. Why are they doing this? There is a danger that will be so many people who are being isolated who are asymptomatic for full 10 days that you could have a major negative impact on our ability to keep society running. So the decision has been made, and we're saying, let's cut that in half. Sorry, I didn't have the, there's the Mr. Fakey talking, right? So they cut that back because of the impact it would have on society. Well, there you go. We said that in the beginning, that you shouldn't shut down society. You shouldn't do all that because of the negative consequences on society. And we were called all kinds of names, and we were right. Close these people out. So now we know these people are full of crap. Now the next big reversal was the thing about T cells. So again, back in about March 2020, we were saying that people who had a previous infection with the coronavirus, and some of the common cold viruses are coronaviruses. We said that some people, we don't know how many, had prior immunity via T cells. We were called conspiracy theorists and not following science. We wrote this stuff up and we pointed to papers. All right, here we go again. SARS-CoV-2 spike T cell response induced upon vaccination or infection remained robust against Omicron. All right, there we go. So the Omicron variant, the T cells recognize it. Here we go. We found that 70 to 80% of CD4 and CD8 T cells response to the spike was maintained across study groups. So, prior infection means you have a recognition of Omicron. I'm not saying that. They're saying that. I'm just reading the paper. Right? So here we go. All right. Despite Omicron's extensive mutations and reduced susceptibility of neutralizing antibodies, the majority of T response induced by vaccination or natural infection cross-recognizes the variant. So, we were arguing that people who had COVID before were basically protected, not because they had active antibodies, but because they had T cell recognition, that when these new variants showed up, the immune system would be likely to recognize it, and therefore the person would have reduced symptoms. And yet and still, up to today, people who have had an infection are denied vaccination status. Now you should ask why, especially when they know this information. Let's go back to this. All right, so I'm not going to go through download the paper, but that's the important part. That if you had an infection already, it recognizes the variant. And that could be a reason why you've seen so few hospitalizations and deaths relative to the sky high case count, because you're still going to show up infected. You're just not going to get sick or as sick. Right? So that's what? That's 3 things that we said last year that the CDC and other people are finally getting to late and throwing people offline. Yeah, real quick, Dr. Robert Malone, the inventor of mRNA technology, has been kicked off Twitter. Now you think about that. The people at Twitter think they know more than the person who invented the technology that's being used to make the vaccines. Yeah, I'm not gonna say anything else. I see the question. I don't know how many people. One of the things that happened was the CDC, they messed up and said at first, and I'm paraphrasing, I don't have it up in front of me, that 75% of the cases were Omicron, and then they dropped it down to 55. And so we don't really know their numbers yet. And they don't sequence everybody. They take a sample and use that. So I can't say it, but we don't know how many people. The numbers is low. And if you look at worldometers, I probably can pick that up. You'll see that, and I'll use New York for example. Here, let me see if I can pick this up. Worldometer, right? USA, right? Worldometer. So we're in the United States, and I'm going to pick New York. Scroll down. So you have the daily cases, right? I guess I can talk about this for a sec. Let me browser. Okay. So here's New York. New York blew by their entire case count. Like, this is when Cuomo was doing the nursing home thing and just blown by. Okay. And if you scroll down here, this is the Cuomo slaughter. And then you see it went down, right? And now you're here. So this equivalent would be, let's see, December 12th. Yeah, 79 last year. And you're basically where you were last year in deaths with this huge case count. So, long way of answering that question. I'm thinking that Omicron hasn't killed a lot of people. Again, relative to the case count, it has to be a small number. But I can't say how big that number is. I'd be just that. So I see Ron, aka Scandal, says he knows of one. I'll take your word for it. I haven't seen it, but that's possibly true. While I'm in here, I want to go to Florida. And the reason why I want to go to Florida is because the news has been trying to get into Florida because they're having a rise. Now, yeah, so here's Florida. Back to the browser. So this is Florida. Florida is blown by its cases. Remember, it got this in the summer. This was last winter. And this is July. Florida has a different seasonal thing going on there from New York. And that's why you see 4 humps. Florida is in a, I think, subtropical zone. So it has spikes in the summer where Northeast doesn't. Because if you've been to Florida in July, August, you know it's hot, it's humid, and if you can be inside under some AC, you're doing that. And indoors is where you have the most transmission. So in their seasons where people are inside, that's when you see the problems. So I just wanted to point that out because they're making a lot of noise about that. But you'll notice here's their deaths. They are way down compared to any time before this season, and way down compared to New York. So just wanted to go on that kind of soundabout way of answering that question. So that's that one. And so we have the T cell response. Now, this next thing I want to point out is this tweet here. Hello? Oh, here we go. Right? Now, I've told people, let me go back to here. I've told people who got exemptions that with the language being used that this is a medical emergency and people who are vaccinated, who are unvaccinated are an existential threat, and we're going to get back to that, to other people. Religious and medical exemptions undercut that argument. And I'll give you an example. Ebola. Ebola is a disease, it's called hemorrhagic disease. You get that and you just start bleeding and you bleed to death and you massive organ failure. You do not want Ebola. I believe it has a 30 to 50% kill rate. Look, if I got told someone with Ebola was near me, I'm getting shot on shot on shot. Okay? Not even trying to mess around with Ebola. Okay? There would be no religious or medical exemption for something with a 50% kill rate. All right. Now, luckily, Ebola is transmitted by touch. It's not by air. It's not airborne. So it doesn't really travel past whatever cluster it is. But just imagine you had that kind of killer rate, right? You wouldn't have these discussions, and nobody in their right mind would say no to an Ebola vaccine with a 50% kill rate and you die by bleeding. You don't want that, okay? So they treat COVID how I would treat Ebola. And so these people with the exemptions, getting back to the story, they're an existential threat to that particular way of thinking, right? So I said they're going to try to not give you the exemption. And for those who got it, like they did the airline pilots, where they said, fine, you got an exemption. By the way, you can't come to work and you're not getting paid, right? Other people in the military, U.S. military, hasn't granted any that I know of. I just read an article where they said, like, I think Marines are like 0. They got 3,000 pending, and they've given 0. So I said, you're going to have them reversed. And I have seen rumblings of people saying they had an exemption, but now they don't. So look out for that. The other thing I told people was that it wasn't going to stop at 2 shots, right? They're going to make you take the 3rd because, again, they think this is an existential threat. So you agreed to the first 2, but guess what? Since you agreed to the first 2, what's your argument going to be against the 3rd? Right? You didn't make an argument that said, I have a moral objection to taking 2 shots. The third is too far. No, you had to make an argument. You were against the shot. Period. Period. You to make that argument, that third shot, that fourth shot, that's coming for you. Unless all this nonsense goes over. I see that movie Outbreak. So here's the thing. So here I'm back in. Here's a college. Now watch this. Make sure I got this up there. It's browser. Okay, here we go. In recognition of the activity of COVID-19 locally and nationally, however, we will implement additional public health measures with the goal of limiting the spread of the Omicron variant virus and continuing our important work. Now, I just showed you New York blew by the case counts from last year and the Delta from last year and the original March spike. Blew by. None of these policies stopped Omicron. Yet these administrators say it's their job to stop the spread and limit the spread. Anyone got questions? Did anyone in the room look at the charts and say, excuse me, but everything before failed? Let's go back to this. Among the additional health and safety measures, notice it's safety, existential threat. You got to understand that with these people. A COVID-19 vaccine booster is required for all students, faculty, and staff on all 3 campuses, including Michigan Medicine. The deadline for reporting is February 4th. I'm stopping there. You've got a current outbreak. People are away for Christmas and New Year's, but they got to get this shot by February 5th. Y'all still falling for this? I don't understand. I mean, you should make it immediately. Yo, campus is open the 3rd. Get your shots on the 3rd or don't come to campus. Now, that's a real emergency. Like I said, if it was Ebola, 50% killer rate, would you have people who might have Ebola walking around your campus for a month? Really? All right. It's an emergency. We're stopping the spread. We should look at Michigan's number. I think I'm going to look at Michigan's numbers when we're done. But let's go on with this thing. Right? We urge you to get boosted as soon as possible. Rocket ship. The president and the provost wrote. I always say these things come out of the highest office. Highest office. It's always the high offices. Don't believe HR and all that. They're just doing their job. They're doing the bidding. The real problem is the leadership. President, provost, board of trustees. That's where problems come from. Anyway, the booster increases protection against symptomatic infection with Omicron to about 75%. Right? Noting that a booster increases protection protection against symptomatic infection. Notice he didn't say infection, period. He said symptomatic infection, right? By about 75%. This is my stock of Dayquil, cold and flu. It doesn't stop infection. It doesn't stop transmission. It reduces, multi-symptom relief. Headache, fever, sore throat, minor aches and pains, nasal congestion, and cough. Non-drowsy. They could just say, yo, get some NyQuil. This is not a vaccine. It is a symptom reducer. Let's go back to what they just wrote. A booster increases protection against symptomatic infection with Omicron to about 75%. And again, YouTube, I'm just reading what they said. I didn't say that. I'm just pointing out that to reduce my symptoms, I can take Dayquil to reduce headache, fever, sore throat, minor aches and pains, nasal congestion, and cough. Multi-symptom relief. I'm just saying, this is not a vaccine. That's all I gotta say. So that's coming out of schools, and I'm telling you, this is going all over the place with these schools. Now, my second to last item is going to be this New York State Assembly bill. Now, this New York State Assembly bill was sent to me by one of the viewers. He knows who he is. So I looked it up, and I'm going to show it to you here. Hey, there we go. With some good news. So Bill A416 relates to the removal of cases, contacts, and carriers of communicable disease who are potentially dangerous to public health. And fortunately, the enacting clause stricken. And when I looked that term up, it meant that they are, that bill's been withdrawn. So, and it actually, let's see, go back here. Go back here. It was actually introduced way back in 2015, and it failed all these times. So this is, basically saying that the governor can remove detention of cases and characters. The governor can just say, hey, here's a health emergency due to a disease, a communicable disease, and they can just put people in detention, through these rules. I'm not going to go through all this because, one, this is not going to pass, because it's not going to get voted on, at least this time. However, there is a law like this in effect in New Jersey, and people don't know that. So I'm going to switch over to the preview. Hello. And because I have it minimized. Okay. So Main PDF. Let's go preview. Okay, there we go. So, New Jersey has a chapter 222, an act concerning the emergency health powers, supplementing Title 26 of the revised statutes. Let me show this to you. So you can skip right to the bottom for a minute, because right here. This was approved September of 2005. So that's important, so you know that this is something from a long time ago. This is not a new idea, and there are probably other states that have this problem. So I just want to see that, and let's oh no, can't do that for a minute. It keeps reloading in the background. Okay, so let's get this page all the way up, because I highlighted certain things that are relevant. So, powers of the commissioner during an public health emergency, right? Let's get this up here. Now, again, this is already law. They can require the vaccinations of persons as protections against infectious disease and to prevent the spread of contagious or possibly contagious disease, except as provided in paragraph 3. We'll get to that, right? To prevent the spread of contagious or possible contagious disease, the commissioner may issue and enforce orders for the isolation or quarantine pursuant to Section 15 of this Act of persons who are unable or unwilling to undergo vaccination pursuant to this section. Okay? So what you have is a law in the books, New Jersey, where the commissioner can say, y'all got to take a shot. But because they can't force it, which is in another section, they can quarantine and isolate you. This power already exists in New Jersey. And notice that they said, right, people who are unwilling to undergo vaccination, right, and unable, right. It gets worse. It gets worse. Right. So here we go. They may issue orders. Issue orders for isolation or quarantine pursuant to 15 who are unwilling for reasons of health, religion, or conscience to undergo treatment pursuant to this section. So what they're saying is that even if you have a religious exemption, a conscientious exemption, or a health reason, if they have said there's a public emergency and they decide that you pose a threat, they still can lock you up. That's basically what that says. And it can be in effect during a state of public health emergency, as long as it's going. What's that movie say? All day long. First person who knows the movie reference, put it in the chat. All right. Now, right, here we go. Section 26. Require isolation of any persons by the least restrictive means necessary to protect the public health. All reasonable means shall be taken to prevent the transmission of infections, right? So there's, here's the section I want. Section B1. Section B, paragraph 1. The following standards shall apply for quarantine and isolation. Persons shall be isolated or quarantined if it is determined by a preponderance of evidence. That's the civil standard. So if there's a lawsuit, it's a civil suit, it's not criminal. That's why they said that. That's the lowest standard allowed under the Constitution, right? Isolated or quarantined if they pose a risk of transmitting an infectious disease to others, right? Preponderance of evidence. Now, let's go back. Let's think of what, right? What did they do? They said that if you are asymptomatic, you still pose a threat, right? Never before were people who were not showing symptoms say, hey, we're going to take you out. Now they do that and they force you to test. So now you're asymptomatic. You're not infected. You refuse a test. Preponderance of evidence says, well, since this disease transmits while you're asymptomatic and this person has refused the test, we think we should quarantine this person until we can determine. That's at least 14 days or 10 days, whatever they come up with. There it is, right in writing. A person's refusal to accept medical examinations. Go back to PDF so you can read that. Scroll this up. Scroll it up a little bit. Here we go. Person's refusal to accept medical examination, vaccination, or treatment pursuant to Section 13 or 14 of this Act shall constitute prima facie evidence that the person should be quarantined or isolated. So you got your religious exemption, you got your medical exemption, you were a conscientious objector, and they say because you asserted your rights, that's evidence in and of itself that you should be quarantined and isolated. Remember, no one has to prove that you're sick. There's no other evidence. You're not bleeding, you're not sneezing, you're not doing anything. They just said, you said, no thanks. Okay. House arrest or quarantine facility. And isolation or quarantine of any person shall be terminated by the commissioner when the person no longer poses risks of transmitting an infectious disease to others. Question. When is that? If a disease is asymptomatic, then it must also mean that you are in a continuous state of being a threat because you continue to refuse medical treatment, vaccines, or right? So we worried about New York. It's coming because this law has been on the books since 2005. and nobody's challenged it. And as long as it goes unchallenged, it becomes precedent. So right now in New York, you dodged a bullet. If they're smart, they're going to look at New Jersey. They're going to take the wording, just put the New York stuff in it, and try it again. Just saying. So, last point here is liberals, New York Post. The Post. Back to the browser. So, one of the things I saw in here was that, right, let's read this. 5% of Republican college students said they wouldn't befriend someone of the opposite party versus 37% of Democrats. 30% of Democrats and 7% of Republicans wouldn't work for someone who voted differently from them. 71% of Democrats and 31% of Republicans wouldn't date someone with opposing views. Now, personally, the dating stuff, I'm not worried about that. You like what you like, and you want to avoid arguments in your relationship. Yeah, that's a good thing. So I'm not on that. But the whole friends, that's weird. There was another. Yeah, here we go. Down here. The Harvard Crimson. Open this up again. So the Harvard Crimson, where is that text? Right. 200 surveyed 236 arts and science faculty members, and a mere 3% described themselves as somewhat or very conservative, versus 76% who identified as somewhat or very liberal. That's a ratio of 25-1. So basically, you have higher ed is simply liberal indoctrination. So that's 76 and 3%. That's 79% who are on one side of the political spectrum or the other. So 30%, no, 20%, 21 are in the middle, I assume. So they're squished out and they have to pick a side. And if you know that 76% of the people, including likely your department heads and the people that give you lifelong employment, are liberal, you're likely to not want to rock the boat. Just keeping it real. Close this. Bye. Okay. So one of the reasons why I brought that up is there's a big divide coming in the country. And it's not just left-right, but it is left-right in terms that the left has gone really far left. So everyone who used to be moderate, they are seen as right-wing. And those of you who kept your heads down and was hoping things would blow over, suddenly found yourself being called an anti-vaxxer and you don't believe in science and all kinds of nonsense. Again, the guy who invented mRNA technology has been booted off Twitter. Yeah, I should tell you a whole lot. How you ban the expert, the inventor, right? You do that because you're not interested in data and science. You're interested in just a message. And for them, this is an existential issue. And I'm going to give an example of the transgender thing. At my job, ex-job, whatever, I came in to work one morning. I'm always the third person in the building. And these signs popped up on what was formerly the men's and ladies' room. They were opposite each other. And it said, any gender bathroom. And of course, people who would work there forever and ever, we knew which was which. I was going to put a sign up that said, stand, sit, right? That was going to be my joke. But it just popped up with no warning. We have a lot of women on our floor. So for them, that's a big threat because a dude could just walk up in the bathroom. There's nothing they could say. And if you oppose that, their argument is that you want them gone. So your ideology, if you don't buy into the left, is existential. Because if you're not down with them being out in public and just forcing you to say that a woman's a man or a man's a woman, and they take that personally as a personal threat, that's why they act like that. That's why they're so, I'll say, irrational with their behavior. And this is why once they get in power, they abuse it and they just take that out on you. Same thing with COVID. They see that as an existential threat. And because of their belief systems, some of them really don't think they're going to die. That's a pretty bold statement, but it's true. Some of them don't realize that life expectancy is 80 to 85. Any years you get beyond that, you lucky. And that COVID's basically taken out people in that line. And, that's unfortunate, but we're all going to go. Hopefully in our sleep, having a nice dream. But some of us is going to be an oncoming 18-wheeler. Some of us is going to be a stray bullet. Some of us is going to be a bullet put to our head. Some of us is going to be a robbery. Some of us is going to be health problems. It's going to be a consequence of how we eat, exercise we didn't do, things that we drank, things that we smoked, and it's going to take us out. And it may not happen immediately, but it's going to happen. And a lot of them aren't willing to face their mortality. And so they see COVID as an existential threat because they must live. Even though 99% of the time, it's not going to kill them. So understanding that, you understand how liberals think. And once you see that they see you as an existential threat, you understand why they behave the way they behave. Because tranny wants to walk around and be called ma'am. That swimmer wants to be considered a woman, period. And when you say that, you don't accept that, and you're not going to call him, her, you're not going to let him swim with the girls, then you've negated a core part of their identity. That's an existential threat. And people will do all kinds of things. And if they can get the government to punish you, because most of these people are punks. They'll talk, but they don't have the stones to make you do it. So they get the police involved, they get the state involved, and they make the state do it to you. And that's what they're like. That's what liberals are doing now. They're getting the police to do their dirty work. They get the mayors, they get the attorney generals, they get all the judges to do their dirty work because they can't do it themselves. It's like that woman that spat on that guy on the airplane while he was eating because he didn't have his mask on, and he said something about Rosa Parks, or she said something Rosa Parks. I said the only reason why she spat on him and hit at him is because the culture is not for men hitting women. Okay? So women generally know that they can smack a dude and get away with it. That's why you get a good, strong woman that'll be like, what? And hit her for you. All right. But generally speaking, guys don't hit women, even if they've been hit or provoked. And that's a good thing, because even as small as I am, I'm stronger than women who are bigger than me. It's a biological fact. So that's what this really is going on. And as long as liberals have power and the state backs them, they will continue to act a fool. And we have to recognize that. So that's why I'm going down that paper. These colleges are going to continue to circle the drain as people like me are either put out or leave voluntarily. And you're going to gut all the productive people, and you're going to be left with people whose only job is to boss other people around about what they think and what they do. And at that point, your college is, personally, if I was in a hiring position and I saw someone from a degree from where I work, and depending on the department, the major, right in the circular trash can as soon as I see it. There's going to be a lot of that coming up. So be careful where you send your kids. Careful who you let educate them. And with that, the ghost is signing off. Thanks for showing. Thanks for coming in. Probably I might see you before the new year, but if not, have a happy new year. Ting and ting and ting.